Are we on? Oh, we're on. Okay, so I guess we are on. So, yeah, great. Okay, good. I think I did this right. I can't swear to it, so I really apologize for any technical errors that you might encounter. Um, but I'm going to do my best to answer as many questions as I can, and we'll go from there. I'm Keith Ayoob. I am a excuse me, a registered dietitian for a long time, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my career because it first of all has been very varied. Secondly, none of it worked out the way I thought it would. So, and that's maybe the message to come here today with. How did I start out? I started out as a clinical dietitian. In fact, even before I got my doctorate degree, I was a clinical dietitian, what they called a relief dietitian. I would come in on weekends, do my thing, and go back to studying. And so that was, it's kind of how I got through graduate school. And that progressed until I got my doctorate. And then after I got my doctorate, I kind of needed, needed to get another job because 2 or 3 days a week just doesn't, wasn't going to be cutting it for a whole career. But I needed to find something to do with my doctorate. I didn't see myself going into completely a research setting. You know, the rats and the labs and all that kind of stuff was not a goal of mine permanently. And what did I want to do? I didn't know. So I thought, well, stay open to and receptive to opportunities. And I had started additional counseling at a pediatric primary residence program where I worked primarily with kids. And a doctor there saw me and said, I think this guy would work over in our clinic. She was part of a large diagnostic and treatment center for children with special needs and cognitive and physical impairments. And unbeknownst to me, she recommended me for this. And when I heard about the position, I thought, no way. Working full time with kids and families with all kinds of physical and cognitive impairments was not how I saw myself working. I didn't think I knew enough to work with that population, and it just sounded like a draining kind of a job to have. And at the same time, so I already knew I wasn't going to do it, but I went for the interview. And it wasn't a full-time job, it was part-time, so I'd need to keep my dietitian, my job as a part-time dietitian. And then I still knew I wasn't going to do it, so I asked an outrageous amount of money where they'd say, just, go away. And they didn't, they countered. And I thought, oh geez, what do I do now? So we countered and went back and forth, and I thought, well, can I do this? I mean, part of it was, I didn't know if I could do this. And that's happened a lot in my career. I didn't know I didn't know if I could do the job. What also happened is that I said, I don't know that I can't. And let's see where this goes. Bottom line, I signed a year contract and I said, okay, a year from now, I'm out of here. And I stayed 33 years. And it went from 2 days a week to 3 days a week to a full-time job with a faculty appointment starting in 1990. And along around in the middle of the 80s, that was in 84 when I started that position, and when I'm that old. And when I started that in the middle of the 80s, something else happened that nobody expected with kids. And the HIV epidemic happened. And when it started to hit kids, most of the kids impacted by that disease had developmental problems. So we saw a lot of them. And none of us was prepared. We didn't even know how it was communicated or transferred, and there was so much unknown. And I thought, I have no idea what to do with this. And all you'd see were these kids getting wasted and wasted and wasted, and no amount of protein seemed to be fixing it. And they were dying, too soon. And it was interesting dynamic because it wasn't just the kids who were dying, it was whole families that were dying. And that was really draining. It was draining work. But as we learned a little bit more, we got a little bit better at it, but it brought other issues into play, which was, I think Ross Laboratories at the time had a formula they developed for the needs of people with HIV infection, and it indicated that. I think it was called Enrich, and what made it specific to HIV infected persons, I don't remember, but I don't remember the formula. But it was interesting because I would want my kids to get that when they couldn't eat, but I couldn't send that home. Why? Because it indicated on the label that it was for the needs of people with HIV infection, and some of those family members weren't aware of that child's condition. So the issues of confidentiality and disclosure, all kinds of things cropped up. As of the 90s or so, mid-90s, more medications came out, and fortunately we don't have to see as many of those kids anymore. And seeing kids deteriorate is draining work. It drained all of us. And one of the things that made me want to seek outside work and outside work with the academy was that I needed some kind of an outlet that was not the 100 neediest cases. So I got involved in things like planning conferences I joined SCAN and planning conferences with on the national level, and it gave me a chance to have professional life become more diverse, and I actually enjoyed it. And I really felt like I was advocating for our profession because I thought our profession was not getting the respect that it deserved. And so the more I got involved in that, the more I also found myself open to other opportunities that came my way. And one of them was, for example, doing consulting to group residence homes for adults with cognitive impairments and physical impairments. So I liked the idea that I had an extra little supplement, so to speak, and it was easy work. It wasn't all that enjoyable, but it was easy. I could do it. It was flexible. I could do it weekends or nights or whatever. So that kind of filled out my work schedule, but it was still the same population, and I wanted to get some kind of what I would call more regular-oriented consumer-type nutrition issues that would crop up. I kind of envied my friends who would see people who don't have families that have all the psychosocial issues that the families that I had were going through. And I thought, boy, that would be much easier. Maybe it's not. It might not be. But I thought I wanted a little bit more diversity. And so when I got a chance to do things like teach behavior modification weight management classes as part of a hospital-based weight management program, I jumped at it. So there was another diversity there. And when I got on faculty, about halfway, in the mid-90s, a colleague of mine here in New York, registered dietitian, was encouraging me to get involved in medical nutrition therapy advocacy because we didn't have any of that. That really didn't crop up until about the millennium. And so it was a number of years of going down to Washington and advocating and visiting senators and Congress people in their offices and their legislative aides and really advocating this and showing the data. And it was a really interesting process to see how that all worked out. It's amazing how much influence you can have when you actually physically go into their offices and meet with them. And sometimes they say, when you ask them, can you support this? I think, yeah. I said, well, why has it taken you so long? And sometimes the response was, nobody came and asked me, and nobody came and talked to me about it. So really, you do have influence there. And as I got involved in that, this same colleague said there's an opportunity to apply to become a media spokesperson in New York City, for the Academy. And he said, why aren't you applying? And I said, because I don't have any media experience. And I really couldn't picture myself that. I mean, I'm no George Clooney, for God's sake. So I couldn't see myself doing any of that. And he said, apply. And I thought, okay. So I applied, and I did my best to get some kind of a media clip to send in, and they said, okay. And I thought, cool. I was terrified because I would meet all wonderful people, and they were all so skilled. And I had no skill whatsoever about this. So they gave us media training, and it was funny because I would, I would make complete mincemeat out of the whole session, and I was terrible at it, but it was a place to learn. And let me let me ask see if there are a few questions. Feel free to, by the way, feel free to ask any questions. I will be more than happy, you know, to answer questions as much as I can. By the way, yes, somebody said, sounds like you had some imposter syndrome. Yeah, probably. I kept thinking, the more success I got, the more I think, oh God, I'm going to be found out. No, just go with it. You know, go with it. And so maybe it's uncomfortable, but just go with it anyway. And it is scary sometimes, but that's okay. One of the things, I guess, if I can have a through line about my career, it's that what did I want to do and what would I advise somebody to do? First of all, I knew what I would ask somebody, what do you want to get out of your career? Not necessarily what do you want to do, but what do you want to get out of it? And what I wanted to get was I wanted to have an impact. And it didn't have to be on a national level. It could be one-to-one. But I wanted to have as much impact and as much influence as possible so that when I hung up my dietitian, you know, apron or whatever, I would say I did something. And maybe nobody's going to know about it, and you know, but I know when I was working one-on-one with that person, that mattered. And if I could do something like that, then my education would have been put to good use. As it turns out, I ended up working one-on-one with people, but I also ended up influencing a lot of people. The work as a spokesperson is so interesting because it gave me a way to reach thousands or sometimes millions of people. I'm here in New York, so it's a major media market, and I started. I did envy some of my colleagues because they'd get these, you know, placements to you know, how to pack a healthy lunch for your kids, and I always got like, would you go on with Dr. Atkins tomorrow with the Today Show? And I'm thinking, okay, wait. But that started at Fenzi one year when it was in Atlanta. I think it was in 1999, and they needed somebody to go and literally debate Dr. Atkins. And I said, you know, at one point I said, you know, the Academy said, we don't do that. I said, we have to, because I didn't want to do it. I didn't think they'd pick me, but I said, we have to, or else they're going to say, I invited them and they turned us down. So it didn't look good. So I thought, okay. So I did that, and was one thing I did learn about me, and if you want to get over the nerves of media, make me mad, and then the nerves go away. And then what happens, and when I hear my colleagues and my organization getting dissed for no reason, I guess sort of the mother hen in all of us comes out, and I said, no, this is not right. And what I did have, as much nerves as I had, I also had a science-based message. Always make your messages science-based. If you give your opinion, state that. And as long as I had my message, I had a good foundation. And that ended up getting to be a very heated debate. And I got back to the clinic, to the conference center, and they said, what the hell did you say? And I said, well, it was a lively debate, but I think it went okay. And apparently every news station, every network was calling them and wanted me on the morning news. So that was an interesting experience. I'm not sure I'd want to repeat all that, but it was a really good experience. And it forced you to think on your feet. And that led to more media appearances and things. And at one point, it also, one of my media interviews ended up getting me invited to give expert testimony in Congress. And I was debating somebody who was marketing diet pills to kids. And I have to tell you, anybody who, that's another thing that gets me going is when I see somebody like a vulnerable population, whether it's kids or disabled kids or elderly people getting taken advantage of or exploited, I get really irate. And that's good for me because it gets me really focused. And then I go Judge Judy. Very focused, but you're not gonna get out of here without understanding where my position is. And that ended up in getting me invited to Congress to testify about the fraud that was happening. And that was a good one. I wanted to do that very much. And it ended up a good experience there. But the next step, I guess, in my career was also working with the private sector and commodity groups and people, like whether it's commodity groups or even large organizations who want to get a good nutrition message out and need to have it crafted. And I worked with my colleague Jim Hill on crafting a global nutrition policy for the Walt Disney Corporation. And that was probably one of the best partnerships I ever had. Disney just kind of let us do our thing. They actually wanted to do more than we wanted to. We wanted to say, no, we want this to stick, and that means baby steps. But it was going baby steps globally. And that was in 2006. We updated those in 2012 when there were new dietary guidelines, and we wanted to take this because it was successful to the next level and say, look, what kinds of standards are we going to use before we can allow our characters to go on the front of our product? And that's what our charge was. It was also in the theme parks, but they have a portfolio of any time, maybe 2,000 products that are usually tied to short-term endorsements to their movies and things like that. But they said they had to have some standards. They couldn't just, endorse anything. So they said, give us a little guidance, and we did. And when we did, as our launch, just before our launch, we did desk-side briefings in Washington with the FDA and USDA, and we got a chance to visit Michelle Obama's people because she had a child obesity initiative, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute meeting as a courtesy turned into 2.5 hours, and they liked the program so much, and they said, the launch was like 3 days away, and they said, we want to do this launch with you. And all of our eyes kind of glazed over, but yeah. So it turned everything about the logistics upside down, because when the First Lady gets involved, security gets involved, and it was a logistical nightmare, but it worked. And it was a little nerve-wracking because once the First Lady gets involved, it's going to get a lot of attention. And we only had one time to get this right. So it fortunately just everything aligned. And it was one of the best experiences, both forming it and continuing it, that I think I've ever had. I wouldn't have traded it really for anything. And so I've continued to now work on a lot of different commodity groups, which I really like. And people have asked me, and they will ask you, or make judgments about it and say, well, you work with industry. And I thought, yeah. And you work with, I've worked, with all kinds of commodities. And they say, you work with all, well, that's, you have conflicts of interest. I said, if you want to change something, you've got to work with people. Okay, and I wouldn't have missed that top opportunity with Disney for anything in the world. But it came with some risks. There were some purists in my institution who frowned on the idea that I would be working with Disney. And I said, the First Lady likes this program. This is really good, people. And they had blinders on. So you're going to run into that. I said, again, it came back to, what do I want to do? I want to make impact, as much a positive impact. And if I can do that, I'll be happy. Other people may not. That is their choice. But I want to be able to make a positive impact. And let me get to some questions now, okay? Because as you can see, I can probably talk an arm and a leg off of most people. But anyway, what's been my favorite job so far? Absolutely, the Disney job was probably one of the most enjoyable because Jim Hill and I had just the greatest partnership. Honestly, it was like we were two peas in a pod. He had strengths that I did not. I had strengths that he did not, and we were both okay with that. So there's no ego involved in it. We just wanted a good outcome for this. And every time I see him, it's like, God, I would do that again in a heartbeat, and he said the same thing. So I'm looking forward to that. One thing that I probably would say is that what's given me a little bit of an edge, I didn't know where this career in dietetics was going to go. In terms of, did I need to get a doctorate? Maybe, maybe not. But I didn't want to look back in 30 years and say, coulda, woulda, shoulda. And I knew I was a male in a primarily female profession, and I would get a lot of comments in the beginning, years ago, about, well, what did you not get into medical school, or what's this thing about getting a doctorate in nutrition and dietetics? It's, why? But I didn't want to go to medical school. I wanted to do this. So I wanted to go as far as I could, and I didn't know if I could get a doctorate, but I didn't know I couldn't, again. And I said, well, let me find out. And if I can't do it, I can't do it, but at least I'll know, and I won't be looking back and saying, I wonder, So I went as far as I could and got it. That has opened some opportunities. It has closed some opportunities, because it's opened some in the sense that now I'm present on a lot of scientific advisory boards and things that probably would not have welcomed me if I did not have that. I've also had a chance to, some advisory boards do not require that. It just means that they might consider me a little more, because having somebody with a doctorate and a faculty appointment at a medical school does round out the rest of the group. So there's some advantages to that too, but it can close off some opportunities as well. So it's just it's a personal decision. I wanted to do it, and I'm glad I did. I don't have any regrets there. And let me get to a few more questions. I think I'm getting the hang of this now. You're very patient with me. Was the Disney job for a certain time frame, or was it ongoing? It went on, I think that's Noreen. It went on for, I would guess, several years. I mean, up until about 2013, and then they kind of figured that, we've got this. And it didn't need as much refining at that point. Maybe they'll call us back at some point, but I think we, even then, 7 years was a long time. It was intense in some years, less so. But they did keep us. I worked with them for a number of years, and always it had to be science-based. But at the same time, Disney's in the treat business. We all get it, and the idea that they're going to have nothing but apples and water for the kids in theme parks, it's just not going to happen. Nor does it have to be that way. I want people to eat healthy food, but I also want them to eat the right portions of healthy food. And to me, when it comes to things like obesity, the obesity crisis, I always have to look back on the practical. And is it caused by sugar? Everybody wants to blame sugar or blame fat or whatever it is, but I thought, these are foods that existed a long time before the obesity crisis, folks. Something else is going on there. And so keep a really good, clear picture. Now, that's not necessarily a sensational picture, because sensation is what sells today. It sells loud and clear. But I want evidence. I want sound science, because that's ultimately what wins out. Why are the top diets, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, and those are the diets that win out all the time. They're not seductive. They're not that sexy, but they're good. And what diets that are the really popular ones that always end up rated bottom? Keto, diets like that are just too extreme for most people to stay on. So think about that. I want to, people will have their ideologies and their philosophies. That's fine. We're all entitled to that. But as responsible and ethical, RDNs, we have to distinguish between our own personal philosophy and what the science says, the credible science. That's an important point, the credible science. You can always cherry pick a study. And I will give my opinion, but I'll state that. And let me see. Have I held any volunteer roles for the Academy besides being a spokesperson? Yes, I'm actually doing one now, and I've done it for some time. It's probably the most hidden committee in the in the Academy. I'm the Academy's liaison to the AMA for the Healthcare Professional Advisory Committee. I'm one of the advisors. And what does that do? Well, once we got medical nutrition therapy codes, we now have billing codes. And there are, we are part of that whole scene, so we get representation there. And when new codes are being proposed and considered, that would be useful for our members to be a part of and to have language in those codes that allows us to bill for those services. I want to make sure that we are written into that code. And so we have meetings 3 times a year. I just had one earlier this month. And when codes crop up that our members could do and could perform, I want to make sure that we get access to those. And so I work with AMA staff, the Academy staff. It's a small group of us. Nobody knows we exist. It's called the Nutrition Services Payment Committee. And it's one of those things where my role as a liaison to the AMA is 3 years at a time. I've been doing it for some time because you really need to cultivate a kind of a working relationship with a lot of these other professional societies, and that takes time, so I've been doing that for a long time, and I will continue to do that. I should say probably that before we sign off, I will put my contact information in the comments. I do have a website. It's cuttothechasenutrition.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and thought I had LinkedIn and Facebook. Twitter, I am at Dr. Dr. Keith Ayoob, AYOOB. Please follow me, okay? I'm not really good at social media, so I really could learn a lot from dietitians who are much, much younger than I am. You can teach me a lot, and you know way more about it, and you're way better at it. So thank you very much. And my website is cuttothechasenutrition.com. I'm also a bit of a foodie, and I love chocolate, and I've actually gotten way into the chocolate world in terms of artisan chocolate. I know way too much about this field. The growing, the beans. I sponsor an heirloom cocoa tree. I mean, it's way interesting. So some of that on my website too, just because it's fun. And at this point in my career, I get to have some fun too, and just do what I would like. So I think we're at about time, but if you want, ask me back and I'll talk some more. Thank you very much to Build Up Dietitians, and thank you to both Andrew and to Leah for kind of changing my diapers through this whole social media thing and getting on here and everything else, because I probably drove them crazy having difficulty with it, but thank you so much for that. So before, I want to make sure I get thank yous in there. And Leah put on my, the website put on my contact information. I will also put my email is cuttothechasenutrition@gmail.com, but I will also put my personal email on there if you'd like to contact me. So please follow me, okay? I'd be more than happy to, and if you respond, I will respond. If you write me, I'll respond back, okay? I'm one of those. Alrighty, and I think we're at about 12:30. If you want to hear more, ask me back. Now I know the setup, okay? Thank you very much, and enjoy your day, enjoy your profession, and remember, think about what you want to get out of it. For me, I wanted to make some impact wherever that took me. I didn't know where it was, but I didn't say no to opportunities that cropped up. Be a little receptive. You don't have to know how it's all going to work out. You just have to be a little receptive and try something new, okay? Enjoy your day. Thank you very, very much.